If she makes you feel like you're nothing, remember this. You were never meant to beg for value. You were born with it. She just couldn't see it, and that's not your fault. What is your fault is staying in the cycle of needing someone who repeatedly shows you that you're not enough for them, but just enough for their boredom. Every time she ignores you, she knows you'll still care. Every time she pulls away, she knows you'll chase. And every time she comes back, it's never about love. It's about control. You feel it in your chest, that tight space between your heart and pride. It's time to break that chain. Comment below, I am the prize. Number 1. Mixed signals are clear answers. Mixed signals aren't confusion. They're control mechanisms crafted to keep you in a position where you're always uncertain, always questioning, always hoping for a clarity that will never come, because the moment you get clarity is the moment you stop chasing. And that would break the dynamic she has built to keep your attention orbiting around her. It's a cycle she maintains, not by telling you directly that she doesn't want you, but by giving you just enough affection to keep you from leaving completely. And that's why one day she texts you, I miss you, and the next she disappears, because the goal isn't connection, it's control. And you must begin to recognize the pattern for what it is, a strategy designed not to love you, but to own your availability. And every time you ignore your gut feeling when she pulls away after getting your attention, every time you tell yourself maybe she's just overwhelmed, or maybe you said something wrong, you give more power to someone who never earned it in the first place. Ask yourself this: how many times have you made excuses for disrespect that would never be acceptable if the roles were reversed? How many times have you settled for a breadcrumb when you're capable of baking the whole loaf? How many nights have you sat there analyzing a conversation word for word while she's texting someone who never overthinks, because he doesn't need to? He knows he's the priority and not the placeholder. You see, the truth is harsh, but it's the only way out. She isn't confused, she's intentional, and if you continue interpreting mixed signals as a reason to hold on, you'll keep living in a state of emotional debt, where your feelings are always overdrawn, and her approval is the currency you're trying to earn but never receive. And this is where your transformation must begin, not in hoping she changes, but in understanding that you have the power to stop participating in your own disrespect, that you don't need closure from the one who kept you in confusion, that you don't need another maybe to prove you deserve a yes, because the clearest signal you'll ever get is how someone treats you when you stop performing for their attention. And the first step in reclaiming your dignity is removing yourself from environments where your worth is only recognized when you threaten to leave. And applying this in real life means you stop replying instantly. You stop checking her page. You stop breaking your schedule just to accommodate hers, and you begin filling your calendar with activities that grow you, whether that's hitting the gym not for revenge, but for routine, reading every morning, not for inspiration, but for mental training, investing in your finances, not to impress her, but to elevate your future, and most importantly, taking solitude not as loneliness, but as space to reconnect with your original blueprint, the one before you were conditioned to think love meant sacrifice and peace meant being chosen last. Because every time you forgive a pattern that wounds you, you reinforce that it's okay to keep hurting you, and that cycle only ends when you create a new one where your value is known, not negotiated, where your energy is protected, not poured into bottomless pits, where your standards are consistent, not flexible for beauty or loneliness, where your actions come from self-command and not emotional hunger. And the way you sustain this is by anchoring your life in structure. Wake up at the same time daily, set goals that stretch but don't overwhelm you. Write down your weekly targets, break them into tasks you can complete without needing to feel motivated. And when you feel that pull to check your phone waiting for her to validate your existence again, Pause and ask yourself what part of you still believes you need her to feel enough. Then get up, move your body, breathe with intention, and remind yourself that clarity doesn't come from overthinking her texts. It comes from observing her patterns and choosing to act in alignment with reality, not fantasy, because the man who lives in wishful thinking stays trapped in emotional chains. But the one who lives by what is, not what could be, is already free. And from today forward, you need to become unavailable for inconsistency, allergic to confusion, intolerant of emotional manipulation disguised as affection. And you do this not by becoming bitter, but by becoming built. You build discipline, you build emotional restraint, you build internal order, and through that, you become untouchable to the drama you once called desire. And the clarity that comes from this way of life will cut through every mixed signal she ever throws your way, not because you decode it faster, but because you don't receive it at all. You've raised the frequency of your standards so high that low-effort behavior doesn't even register anymore. And in this space of discipline, a new version of you emerges, one who doesn't ask, "What does this mean?" but instead says, "This isn't enough." One who doesn't chase after love that plays hide and seek, but waits at the throne of his purpose, knowing the right people come not when you beg for them, but when you no longer need them. And in this space, mixed signals aren't even an issue. They're invisible noise beneath a man who finally chose himself without apology, without negotiation, without delay. That's the man who unlocks the next chapter. And that's exactly why the Stoic relationship blueprint exists, for the man who's ready to stop overthinking and start mastering his life. This isn't just a book, it's a system rooted in timeless Stoic principles designed to rewire the way you see yourself, your relationships, and your future. And now, for the first time ever, it's available as an audiobook, so you can walk, jog, or train while filling your mind with clarity, discipline, and power. Imagine rebuilding your self-worth while walking through your neighborhood. Imagine learning the exact tools to reclaim your peace while running in silence, truths flowing. This knowledge is yours for life. Once you have it, it never expires, never fades, and no one can take it from you. The link is in the comments. Number 2. If she wanted to, she would. You've been told patience is a virtue, but in your case, it's become a trap that convinces you to stay in situations where you're treated as optional, not essential, and every time you accept another excuse, another "I'm just going through something" message, another missed call, another day of silence followed by a sudden burst of attention, you're not being loyal. You're being used as a placeholder for someone who's emotionally unavailable, yet still unwilling to let you go because your presence serves a purpose, not for connection, but for convenience. And as long as you keep believing that her delays are circumstantial and not intentional, you keep feeding a lie that drains you day by day. You keep living under the delusion that one day she'll wake up, appreciate your loyalty, and finally return the energy you've been giving. But that day never comes because she already knows you'll stay regardless. You'll stay even when she treats strangers better, even when she prioritizes everyone else and leaves you wondering where you stand. And the brutal truth is, you don't stand anywhere, because to her, you're not a priority. You're a reserve option, emotionally available, always responsive, always waiting. And this isn't love. This is emotional dependency built on a script you were never meant to play. So it's time you remove yourself from the idea that love should be earned through waiting, through proving, through enduring inconsistency, and instead see that real connection requires no chasing, no convincing, and certainly no decoding. And here's where you reclaim your power, by not asking, not reminding, not pleading, but by moving. Moving your focus away from someone who only engages when it's easy, someone who only remembers your value when they fear losing your attention, And that's not connection, that's manipulation. And once you see that her actions always speak louder than her words, you stop needing the words entirely, because people show up for what matters to them. People make time for who they value. People put energy into the things they fear losing. And if she's not doing that for you, then she's already made her choice. And no amount of kindness, patience, loyalty, or emotional exposure will change that. Because what changes your life is not her choosing you. It's you choosing to stop accepting half-love and start building a world where your time is sacred, where your emotions are guarded, where your peace is the foundation of your decisions. And the way you start is simple. Stop replying when the energy isn't consistent. Stop dropping your schedule to match hers. Stop putting your emotional growth on pause, hoping she'll catch up. And instead, wake up each day with a plan that's yours. Set daily targets, pursue your health, learn a new skill, eliminate distractions, and most importantly, build a system where your validation comes from your progress, not from the texts she may or may not send. And you do this by anchoring yourself in the now, by practicing presence not to win her back, but to win yourself back, because you've given enough. Enough explanations, enough chances, enough love to someone who never earned it. And today is the day you end that pattern, not with resentment, but with resolve. The resolve to no longer wait for the bare minimum, to no longer settle for uncertainty disguised as effort. And once you internalize this truth, your life transforms, because now she doesn't get to reappear on her terms. Now she doesn't get the same access to the version of you who waited endlessly, who lowered his standards in the name of patience, who mistook crumbs for a feast. Now she only sees the man who rebuilt without her, who became untouchable, not because he hated her, but because he finally loved himself enough to leave. And that's the shift that makes you unstoppable. When you stop hoping and start building, when you stop seeking and start choosing, when you stop doubting and start moving, because the man who no longer waits is the man who wins. And that victory doesn't come from revenge or silence. It comes from the unshakable clarity that your time is too valuable to be wasted on someone who needed to lose you to see what they had. And the irony is, once you step fully into your own life, detached from their confusion, indifferent to their delays, unfazed by their inconsistency, that's when they'll reach out again. But by then, you won't need their message, because you'll be too far into your journey to even read it, too focused on your purpose to answer, too grounded in your peace to entertain the same story you've already outgrown. Number 3, your value isn't up for debate. You are not a product that needs marketing. You are not a pitch that requires constant selling. And every time you find yourself trying to explain why you matter, why you deserve respect, why your effort should be appreciated, you are shrinking your value to fit into a space that was never built to hold you. And this isn't humility. This is self-neglect disguised as patience. And the longer you stay in environments where your worth must be justified, the more you begin to internalize the idea that love is something you must perform for, not something that flows from presence and alignment. And this is where your downfall begins. Not because you lack value, but because you hand it over like it's a burden instead of a standard. And every long paragraph you send, every emotional explanation you write, every time you repeat yourself, hoping they finally understand, you're not speaking for clarity, you're pleading for basic respect. And that alone should tell you everything, because real connection doesn't require you to be a lawyer defending your place in someone's life. It requires consistency, respect, and mutual recognition. And once you realize that your time is being spent proving what should already be obvious, the next move is clear. Stop speaking and start observing. Stop debating and start deciding. Stop asking to be seen and start walking away from the blind. And here's the shift you must make. Not for her, but for you. You begin to reclaim your identity by becoming unavailable to spaces that drain your dignity. You stop initiating conversations that always die in your hands. You remove yourself from dynamics where you're only called upon when convenient, and you replace that energy with direction, not distraction. Direction that comes from structure, from building your day around your goals, not her mood, from anchoring your actions in purpose, not approval, from rewriting your routine around your own elevation, not around her availability. And this starts with clarity. Wake up every morning and write down your top 3 outcomes for the day. Track your habits, set boundaries with your time. Stop answering calls that interrupt your focus. Start reading again, not to escape, but to build depth. And when you feel the urge to explain yourself again, pause and remember. Your value isn't a presentation, it's a posture. And the more you explain, the more you train people to expect justification for what should be obvious. And this conditioning creates a cycle where you become the emotional provider in a relationship that gives you none. And now you're confused, wondering why you feel drained, wondering why you're anxious, wondering why she doesn't respond the way you hope. But it's not because she doesn't hear you, it's because she doesn't care to understand, and your explanations are not falling on deaf ears, they're falling on indifferent ones. And the truth is harsh, but it frees you. You don't need to be understood to be respected. You need to be firm enough to walk away when your energy is misread. And this is the discipline most people lack. Not the discipline to speak up, but the discipline to stop speaking when it's no longer heard. The discipline to protect your voice, to hold your presence sacred, to guard your time like it's currency, because it is. And every time you spend it trying to be validated by someone who won't even look up from their phone while you're pouring your soul out, you're not being strong, you're being emotionally enslaved. And the man who chooses peace over performance is the one who becomes untouchable because he no longer looks for confirmation outside of himself. And when you embody this fully, your energy shifts. You speak less, you move sharper, you observe more, you react slower, and your absence becomes more powerful than your presence ever was, because now people feel the gap when you leave, not because you shouted your worth, but because your silence echoed louder than their neglect ever anticipated. And in this state, you become the standard, not the seeker. And this is the truth most won't tell you. She didn't miss your words, she ignored them because they cost her nothing. And once she sees that your absence is the new price of disrespect, that's when you rise, not to teach her a lesson, but because your growth demands it. And from this moment on, your new rule is simple. Never argue your worth again. Never explain loyalty to someone who profits off your pain. Never stay in places where being yourself requires proof. Because the minute you try to convince someone that you matter, you tell them that they get to decide. And they don't. You do. Number 4. Silence speaks louder. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, when in reality it is the sharpest display of control and the clearest expression of value. Because the moment you stop explaining, stop responding, stop trying to correct their perception of you, you shift the entire dynamic not through confrontation, but through complete withdrawal from the cycle that once kept you trapped. And that's when the power returns, not through rage or outbursts, but through deliberate indifference to the games you used to engage in, because you finally realize that constant communication won't fix a broken connection. It only delays the truth that you've been avoiding. And the truth is this: people know exactly what they're doing when they ignore you, delay responses, or leave your messages unread while staying active elsewhere. And they're not confused. They're testing the boundaries of what you will tolerate, and every time you reach out again to close the gap they created, you confirm their belief that you will always come back. And it is in that cycle where your energy is bled dry, where your mind becomes cluttered, your time becomes wasted, and your purpose becomes hijacked by emotions that are constantly being played with. And so silence must not be reactive. It must be strategic. It must not be temporary. It must become a principle, one that governs your interactions, your boundaries, your internal code. Because when you no longer speak into spaces that won't echo back respect, you start hearing yourself again. And that is the beginning of your rise. Because your words lose their value in places where they're expected, not earned. And the more you repeat yourself, the more your voice becomes background noise to someone who stopped listening a long time ago. And this is what most refuse to admit. You don't need another conversation to be heard. You need discipline to walk away when it's clear that the energy is one-sided. And from there, your silence becomes the recalibration of your identity. Not because you're hiding, but because you're elevating. And now every move you make, every hour you protect, every distraction you ignore is a message far louder than any explanation you could ever give. And it starts to show in your posture, your choices, your focus. And she will feel it, not because you wanted her to, but because absence screams where presence used to speak softly. And she'll try to reach out eventually, maybe with a vague message, maybe with a question that's just vague enough to draw you back in. But you won't respond, not because you're trying to be petty, but because you're done auditioning for someone who only clapped when they were losing you. And this is how your life transforms. When silence stops being something you fear and becomes something you use, and you begin applying this in your schedule by choosing deep work over distractions, planning your days without waiting for texts, protecting your mornings from drama, and ending your nights without needing closure. And suddenly you begin to feel your mind clear, your body strengthen, your soul settle, because you've removed the noise of needing to be validated by someone who never saw you clearly. And this isn't about pretending to be okay. This is about becoming okay because you finally chose you. And from that space, you build, day by day, routine by routine, action by action. You begin creating a version of yourself who doesn't need to be heard to feel grounded, who doesn't need to be seen to be solid. And this is the level that people notice, not because you announced it, but because you embody it. And in this silence, you find answers that your conversations never brought. And you begin to understand that most relationships don't need closure, they need distance. And most emotions don't need validation, they need discipline. And when you fully accept that, your entire standard for connection changes, because you're no longer looking for someone to match your energy. You're focused on protecting it. And in that protection, your presence becomes sacred again. And only those who show consistent effort, clarity, and intention will ever get close to it. And now when someone pulls away, you don't chase, you evaluate. And when someone returns, you don't respond, you observe. And when someone offers you less than you give, you don't complain, you replace. And this is where you separate from the cycle you used to live in, not by fighting it, but by outgrowing it. And your silence now speaks a language only the focused understand, a language of progress, of discipline, of emotional maturity, where you don't need to prove anything, because everything you've built speaks for itself. And she will notice it too late, because by the time she recognizes your absence, you'll be too far. Gone, not because you disappeared, but because you finally arrived at the place where you were always supposed to be, aligned, elevated, and completely unbothered. Number 5. You are the prize. Act like it. You are the prize, but as long as you move like the discount, you'll keep getting treated like the leftover. And this isn't just about how others see you, it's about how you see yourself. Because everything begins with the way you perceive your own time, your own standards, your own energy. And when you place your worth in the hands of someone else's opinion, you've already devalued it before they even got the chance to do it for you. And the reason you feel empty after giving everything is because you're giving from a place of hoping to be chosen, instead of knowing you already are the one. And this is where the shift must happen, because no one can hand you the confidence you've been waiting for. No one is going to give you permission to rise, and no one is going to rescue you from the cycle you keep choosing to live in. And every time you bend your schedule, rearrange your day, lose sleep, kill your ambition, and shrink your voice to maintain someone's presence in your life, you are screaming to the world that your needs come second, that your priorities don't matter, that your mission can be paused, and you're doing all of this for someone who doesn't even see you clearly, because they only see what you tolerate. And until you start walking like your value is non-negotiable, you'll keep being placed on the shelf, only to be picked up when convenient. And this is the part no one tells you. Being the prize is not about arrogance or ego. It's about standards, and standards require work. They require you to rise early when no one's watching. They require you to keep your word. Even when it's hard, they require you to eat clean, train consistently, plan weekly, write goals, track habits, and remove anything that doesn't align with your future. And that includes the people who treat you like you're replaceable. Because the moment you start building in silence, the moment you stop explaining your absence, the moment you replace reaction with redirection, you'll feel it shift. Your presence gets heavier, your boundaries get tighter, your discipline gets sharper, and suddenly you don't crave attention anymore because your life is giving you the validation their affection never could. And now the focus isn't proving anything to anyone. It's becoming so internally full that external approval becomes irrelevant. And this begins with small choices. Waking up before the sun hits, not because you have to, but because your mission demands it. Working out not for appearance, but for discipline. Reading every day not to escape, but to sharpen your mind. Investing your money not to look rich, but to become free. And cutting off distractions, not because you're cold, but because your peace now costs too much to be disturbed by low-value conversations. And this is what becoming the prize looks like. It's not louder, it's cleaner, it's structured, it's silent, it's sharp, and it's absolutely unavailable for games. And once you live like this long enough, your entire vibe changes and people notice. Not because you announced it, but because they can feel it. And the ones who once ignored you start circling back, but they don't get access anymore because the version of you they neglected no longer exists. And now she sees you. But it's too late because you see yourself clearer than you ever have, and you won't lower your gaze again, not for nostalgia, not for weakness, not for loneliness, because you've tasted the freedom that comes with emotional clarity. And you've realized that love doesn't look like confusion, that loyalty doesn't feel like guessing, that being the prize means never chasing comfort that costs your peace. And this is where you begin to act like it, by removing your availability for inconsistency, by showing up for yourself daily, by not negotiating your standards when attraction is involved, and by living like your future is depending on you, because it is. And the reason so many never reach this level is because they'd rather be liked than respected. They'd rather be accepted than elevated, and they'd rather be available than valuable, but not you, not anymore. From now on, everything changes, because you're not the man who waits for validation. You're the one who creates momentum. You're not the one hoping she sees your worth. You're the one deciding who's qualified to stay. And you're not the one explaining why you matter. You're the one who became undeniable through routine, through patience, through absolute focus. And this isn't about being heartless. It's about having heart for the right things. And that starts with protecting the life you're building from the people who only love the parts of you they can use. And once you internalize this, you move different, and the ones who once overlooked you start noticing. But by then, you're too far into your own evolution to care, because you've realized that the real prize isn't her approval, it's your growth, and no attention, no beauty, no message will ever be more valuable than the peace you earned by finally becoming the man who doesn't chase being picked. He chooses himself first every single time. You've spent enough time explaining yourself, waiting to be chosen, questioning your worth, while the world fed you lies to keep you quiet, small, and obedient. That ends now. If you're ready to take back your time, your mind, and your peace, then it's time to grab the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, a powerful guide built on timeless principles that society never wanted you to learn. Why? Because once you think clearly, you stop tolerating disrespect. Once you apply what's inside, you become unshakable. And that's dangerous to the systems built to keep you weak. The audiobook version is now available, so you can train your mind while walking, jogging, or grinding. No more excuses, no more begging. Just you, focused, locked in. The link's in the comments. Comment, "I choose clarity over chaos." If you're ready, like this video, subscribe, and help bring this truth to more men who've been lied to, played, and left in silence for too long. Let's save years of pain for you and for the next man who needs this.